Hello, I'm Alma Angeles, and you're watching Eagle News International.
And I'm CJ Hero. Welcome to the program. On tonight's headlines.
Security forces fired rubber bullets and tear gas at anti-coup protesters in Myanmar as demonstrators around the country defied a military ban on rallies.
The WHO mission to China to uncover the origins of the coronavirus has failed to identify the animal source, according to scientists.
1 year after his first impeachment, former President Donald Trump finds himself the subject of an unprecedented second trial in the Senate, whose members must determine whether he incited a deadly assault on the U.S. Capitol.
Trump, President.
And the first Arab interplanetary mission is expected to reach Mars orbit Tuesday on the most critical stage of its journey to unravel the secrets of weather on the red planet.
First to Myanmar, security forces fired rubber bullets and tear gas at anti-coup protesters as demonstrators around the country defied a military ban on rallies. Protests erupted for a fourth straight day against last week's coup to oust civilian leader Aung San Suu Kyi as international condemnation of the putsch grew. The rallies came despite a warning from the junta that they would take action against demonstrations that threatened stability and a new ban on gatherings of more than 5 people. In Naypyidaw, the remote capital, purpose-built by the previous military regime, witnesses said police fired rubber bullets at protesters after earlier blasting them with water cannon. In Yangon, Sanchong Township, scores of teachers marched on the main road, waving a defiant three-finger salute that has become a signature gesture of the protesters.
Meanwhile, after watching hundreds of thousands of people rally in opposition to last week's coup, Junta Chief General Min Aung Hlaing made a televised speech on Monday evening to justify seizing power. He insisted the military would abide by its promises and reinstall democracy. He also declared that things would be different from the army's previous 49-year reign, which ended in 2011. Watch this.
19အကြောင်းပြုပြီးကြိုတင်ဆန္ဒမဲပေးခြင်းတွေကိုကြီးညာချက်အမျိုးမျိုးထုတ်ပြီးဆောင်ရွက်ခဲ့တာတွေတရားမျှတတဲ့မဲဆွယ်စည်းရုံးခွင့်များရှိခဲ့တာတွေဟာရွေးကောက်ပွဲမတိုင်မီကတည်းကအငြင်းပွားစာတွေဒီလိုတွေးရှိချက်တွေမဲသမာမှုတွေစင်းတွေအတွက်သက်ဆိုင်ရာတာဝန်ရှိသူများကိုစစ်စစ်မေးမြန်းလည်းရှိနေပါတယ်။ရေပေါ်ကာလဆိုင်ရာပြဋ္ဌာန်းချက်များနဲ့အညီဆောင်ရွက်ပြီးစီးပြလို့ရှိရင်ဖွဲ့စည်းပုံအခြေခံဥပဒေ2008ခုနှစ်နဲ့အညီလွတ်လပ်ပြီးတရားမျှတတဲ့ပါတီစုံဒီမိုကရေစီထူထူရွေးကောက်ပွဲကိုပြန်လည်ကျင်းပပြီးအနိုင်ရတဲ့ပါတီကိုဒီမိုကရေစီစံချိန်စံနှုန်းများနဲ့အညီနိုင်ငံတော်တာဝန်ကိုလွှဲအပ်နိုင်ရေးဆက်လက်ဆောင်ရွက်သွားရန်ဖြစ်ပါတယ်။တိုင်းဒေသပြည်သူလူထုတရားလုံးစိတ်ခံစားမှုတဲ့ပဂရိအချက်လက်များအမှန်တရားများကိုရှေ့ရှုပြီးလက်တွဲညီဆောင်ရွက်သွားကြပါစို့လို့မြစ်တာရက်ခတိုက်တွန်းလိုပါတယ်။အားလုံးကိုကျေးဇူးတင်ပါတယ်
The general said the country welcomed foreign investment and also announced lifting of coronavirus restrictions, including reopening schools and Buddhist pagodas. He added that Rohingya refugees who fled to Bangladesh during a 2017 crisis will continue to be repatriated to the Rakhine state, but those pledges were accompanied by threats. In the face of the increasingly bold wave of defiance, the military warned that opposition to the junta was unlawful. In a statement read on state media, they said action must be taken against activities that threaten stability and public order.
Meanwhile, New Zealand became the first foreign government to take concrete public action, announcing the suspension of high-level military and political contacts with Myanmar. Unveiling the measures, Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern called for the international community to, quote, strongly condemn what we're seeing happen in Myanmar. Let's listen in.
With Myanmar following the military coup, New Zealand is suspending all high-level political and military contact with Myanmar. Minister Mahuta has also directed that New Zealand's aid program to Myanmar should not include projects that are delivered with or benefit the military government. We've also agreed to implement a travel ban to be formalised in the coming week on Myanmar's military leaders. I think every New Zealander would be devastated to see, after years of working so hard to build a democracy in Myanmar, to see what we've seen in recent days unfold led by the military. Is we will do what we can from here in New Zealand, and one of the things we can do is suspend that high-level dialogue at a political level. We can put in place travel bans, and we can make sure that the aid funding we put into Myanmar does not in any way support the military regime.
The Prime Minister said the measures would include travel bans on senior military figures. Myanmar's military last week detained civilian leader Aung San Suu Kyi and dozens of other members of her National League for Democracy party, ending a decade of civilian rule. Ardern said New Zealand wanted the UN Human Rights Council to hold a special session to discuss developments in Myanmar. She also said that New Zealand's aid programs in Myanmar, worth about 42 million New Zealand dollars a year, would continue with safeguards that they did not benefit or come under the control of the military junta.
The United States has led global calls for the generals to relinquish power and issued a fresh statement on Monday following the junta's warnings against the protesters. State Department spokesman Ned Price also called on China, the historic partner of Myanmar's military, to join major democracies in condemning the coup. He also said U.S. requested to speak to Suu Kyi, but they were denied. Watch this.
I think more broadly, when it comes to what we've seen in recent days and recent hours, it is fair to say that we stand with the duly elected representatives of the people of Burma in their efforts to speak for the people of the country. We join them in demanding the immediate and full restoration of the democratically elected government. We stand with the people of Burma, support their right to assemble peacefully, including to protest peacefully in support of the democratically elected government, and the right to freedom of expression, including the freedom to seek, to receive, to impart information both online and offline. We're, of course, very concerned about the military's recent announcement restricting public gatherings. We have been encouraging China, both privately and in public, to condemn this action, to join the international community, to join the United States and those other countries, a large swath of the world that has spoken out in no uncertain terms to condemn this anti-democratic action. And to that end, I would point you to the statement that came out of the UN Security Council last week. It did have some strong language. Of course, China did not stand in the way of that, but we continue to believe that the Chinese need to further condemn what has taken place in Burma in recent days. So I'm going to speak for the Department of State. I will say that shortly after the events of February 1st, we made an effort to reach out to Aung San Suu Kyi. We did that both informally and we did that formally as well. Those requests, of course, were denied.
President Joe Biden has threatened new sanctions against Myanmar unless the military regime relinquishes power. The coup, in which civilian leader Aung San Suu Kyi and dozens of other members of her National League for Democracy party were detained, ended a decade of partial civilian rule in Myanmar and triggered international condemnation.
Meanwhile, relatives of an Australian economic advisor to Aung San Suu Kyi said they were distraught over his detention in the wake of the military coup. Now, Macquarie University professor Sean Turnell was the first foreign national confirmed arrested by the new military junta, which took power last week. Australian Foreign Minister Marise Payne has summoned the Myanmar ambassador over the case. She also said the country was deeply concerned about the situation in Myanmar and was providing consular assistance to a number of Australians.
Britain and the European Union request that the United Nations Human Rights Council hold a special session in response to the ongoing political crisis in Myanmar. Watch this.
The United Kingdom would like to inform all colleagues that together with the European Union, we have submitted a request for a special session on the human rights implications of the crisis in Myanmar with the support of 19 additional council members. This is in response to the state of emergency imposed in Myanmar and the arbitrary detention of democratically elected politicians and civil society by the military. This has grave implications for human rights in the country. We must react to the calls of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, who has expressed her grave concern about the removal of the civilian government and the arbitrary detention of dozens of political leaders, human rights defenders, journalists, activists, and others by the military.
Braithwaite said the backers of the special session call would inform other council members soon about the drafting of a resolution on the issue. He said the motion had the support of an additional 19 of the council's 47 members. That means, in principle, that the request would fulfill the requirement for the backing of at least a third of the council's members, paving the way for a special session prior to the next regular council session, which kicks off on February 22nd.
Meanwhile, the WHO mission to China to uncover the origins of the coronavirus has failed to identify the animal source, according to scientists today. Experts believe the disease, which has gone on to kill more than 2.3 million people worldwide, originated in bats and could have been transmitted to humans via another mammal. While transmission from animals was the likely route, Liang Wanyan, head of the China team, told reporters that so far the reservoir hosts remain to be identified. He added that studies show the virus can be carried long distance on cold chain products, appearing to nudge towards the possible importation of the virus, a theory that has abounded in China in recent months. He also said that there was no indication the sickness was in circulation in Wuhan before December 2019, when the first official cases have been recorded. WHO foreign expert Ben Mbarek, who was based in the WHO's Beijing office for 2 years from 2009, backed up the assertion, saying there was no evidence of large outbreaks in Wuhan before then. The expert spent 1 month in China, 2 weeks in quarantine, and the same again on field work. But already over a year after the virus emerged, some of it was of questionable relevance to their stated aim of finding the virus source, including a visit to a propaganda exhibition celebrating China's recovery from the pandemic. The group spent just an hour at the seafood market, where many of the first reported clusters of infections emerged over a year ago. They also appeared to spend several days inside their hotel, receiving visits from various Chinese officials without going out into the city. But deeper research was carried out at the Wuhan Virology Institute, where they spent nearly 4 hours and said they met with Chinese scientists there, including Shi Shengli, one of China's leading experts on bat coronaviruses and deputy director of the Wuhan lab.
Now here in the Philippines, Vaccine Czar Secretary Carlito Galvez Jr. said the government will hold internal final rehearsal 2 or 3 days before the scheduled arrival of coronavirus vaccines in the country to assure preparedness for the massive inoculation campaign. Galvez, also the National Task Force Against COVID-19 chief implementer, cited the importance of conducting the full-scale simulation exercise, particularly the management of the vaccine logistics and the deployment of vaccines to cold chain warehouses. Watch this.
Ibig sabihin nun, okay yun. And then, talagang gagawin natin is we want na ma-perfect natin talaga yung timing motion. Then from here, from the airport and going here, nakita natin very smooth. Actually, hindi na nga namin hindi na nabutan na yung van kasi talagang with the escorts at nakita natin maganda ang security ng PNP. We would like to thank the PNP. Talagang nakita natin very visible sila sa highway. At the same time, talagang napakabilis ng transport. And we saw na umabot dito sa from the airport, yung nagtinayman ko hanggang dito, wala pang less than 1 hour, 50 minutes lang. Ang 120 minutes. So, ibig sabihin talagang napaka-baba ng timing natin. At nakikita natin na pwede pa natin ma-improve. So, nakita ko ngayon na kung i-rate natin, nasa 80% po tayo, from 100.
So from the rehearsals or celebration today, nandito po yung target time na binabanggit ng DOH na kailangan na travel, na yes, ano po.
Galvez said the country cannot afford to make mistakes in the vaccine arrival and deployment given its limited global supply. Ensuring a refined actual time and motion of the vaccine deployment, he said, will prevent the possibility of vaccine wastage.
And stunning news in the United States on just how quickly those highly contagious variants of the coronavirus is now spreading across the country. Scientists say cases of the UK variant now appear to be doubling in the US every 10 days. A team of scientists led by researchers at the Scripps Research Institute analyzed 500,000 test samples collected across the country since last summer. And they found the variant was introduced at multiple points into the U.S. in November last year. And while currently low in overall frequency, it's set to become the dominant form of the virus by March. And there are fears that B117 could trigger a new spike, and it's spreading particularly rapidly in Florida, according to the study. The study's authors called for the U.S. to build up its COVID genomic surveillance system. Here's Rochelle Walensky, Director of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
I'm asking everyone to please keep your guard up. The continued proliferation of variants remains of great concern and is a threat that could reverse the recent positive trends we are seeing. As of February 7th, 699 variant cases have been confirmed across 34 states, with 690 of these cases being the B117 variant, the variant first reported in the UK. Please continue to wear a mask and stay 6 feet apart from people you don't live with. Avoid travels, crowds, and poorly ventilated spaces, and get vaccinated when it's available to you.
In the same White House coronavirus briefing, Dr. Anthony Fauci said current vaccines remain effective against the variant. He also stressed the importance on making sure the second dose is administered on time. In the same White House's briefing, he said that while both the Moderna and Pfizer mRNA vaccines did result in a neutralizing antibody response that was above the threshold after one dose, he said the second dose produced a tenfold response. Watch this.
We know from the original studies that following a single dose of either the Moderna or the Pfizer, you had a response that gave you a neutralizing antibody above the threshold of protection. So it did give some degree of protection. And the question was, it was protection clearly against the wild type. However, the boost, either 21 or 28 days later, was 10-fold higher. So it went, for example, from 1 to 100 to well over 1 to 1,000 in the titer. The reason that's important, not only because of the height of the response and the potency of the response, but as you get to that level of antibody, you get a greater breadth of response. And by breadth of response, we mean it covers not only the wild type and currently circulating virus, but also the variants that we see circulating, particularly the 117 and the 351. So it's not just a matter of potency, it's a matter of the breadth of what you can cover. The other theoretical issue that could be problematic with regard to only a single dose, that if you get a suboptimal response, the way viruses respond to pressure, you could actually be inadvertently selecting for more mutants by a suboptimal response. So for that reason, we have continued to go by the fact that we feel the optimum approach would be to continue with getting as many people on their first dose as possible, but also making sure that people on time get their second dose.
The World Health Organization insisted that the AstraZeneca vaccine was still a vital tool in the global fight against the pandemic after South Africa delayed the start of its inoculation program over concerns about the drug's efficacy against a virus variant. Take a look.
What we've proposed is a two-stepped introduction process of the rollout. The first step, we would vaccinate about 100,000 people or so to monitor what the hospitalization rates are. It'll probably take us a few weeks to do that. South Africa has to ensure that we do not vaccinate, using the 1 million doses of AstraZeneca vaccine that we have, without knowing whether it's efficacious against severe disease and hospitalization. So it's prudent that we do it in a stepped approach. If we can have one variant, we can expect that we will have many more in the future. So indeed, much of what we are doing now sets a stage that prepares us for future variants as well.
We mustn't start, concluding that this vaccine doesn't work at all. What we've seen is data from a small study. It's indicative. It is telling us we need to collect more data, we need to study it more. But from all the available evidence, the AZ vaccine and all the other vaccines that have been approved so far reduce death, reduce hospitalization, and reduce severe disease. And that's our goal for the first part of this pandemic, is to reduce mortality, to end all preventable deaths.
Vastly too early to, be dismissing this vaccine as this is a very important part of the global response to the current pandemic, and we need to find better vaccines probably against the variants that are emerging, but that we still have a lot of information that we need to gather.
The primary job of vaccines right now is to reduce hospitalizations and death. And right now, the data on, I think, all of the vaccines and all of the situations that they're working to do that. We may need second and third generation vaccines to do more. We may need better vaccines to do more than just stop deaths and stop hospitalizations. But right now, we have the tools to stop both by adequate control of the disease at community level and by the use of vaccines to protect the most vulnerable and our frontline health workers.
The AstraZeneca vaccine is currently a vital part of COVAX, which was set up to procure COVID-19 vaccines and ensure their equitable distribution around the world. But the vaccine has run into several setbacks. South Africa said it would suspend the start of its COVID-19 vaccinations with the AstraZeneca jab after a study showed the jab failed to prevent mild and moderate cases of the virus variant that has appeared in the country. Regulatory authorities in several European nations have refused to authorize the vaccine for use among the over 65s, by far the most vulnerable age group for serious COVID-19 disease due to a lack of data proving its efficacy among older people.
In other news, Dr. Congo on Sunday announced a resurgence of Ebola in its troubled east after a woman died of the disease just 3 months after authorities declared the end of the country's latest outbreak. The World Health Organization said it had dispatched a team of epidemiologists to the scene of the latest death to investigate. Watch this.
Donc, le ministre national a annoncé à la communauté nationale et internationale que voilà, nous vivons la 12e épidémie ou le 12e épisode de l'épidémie à virus Ebola.
The WHO's Africa office said the woman had died in an area that had previously been one of the epicenters of the latest outbreak near the town of Butembo. since the West African Ebola crisis of 2013 to 2016, which left 11,300 dead across the region. The WHO has eyed each new outbreak with great concern, treating the most recent Congolese epidemic as an international health emergency. DR Congo had on November 18 declared that epidemic, which lasted nearly 6 months in the northwestern province of Equator, to be over.
In the United Kingdom, authorities said everyone will receive the COVID virus jabs regardless of immigration status. Here is Aribel Celestino joining us live. Hello, Aribel.
Hi, Alma. And yes, undocumented migrants in Britain will still be able to get COVID vaccines without being subject to status checks, the government said on Monday. Anyone in Britain can register with doctors and access free frontline medical care regardless of their immigration status. Some data is shared with the Interior Ministry, which is responsible for border enforcement and investigating irregular immigration, including deporting those with no right to remain. However, the Health Ministry has made clear to the officials in the state-run National Health Service, NHS, that people receiving COVID-19 vaccinations, as well as testing and treatment, are not subject to any immigration status checks. Coronavirus vaccines will be offered to everyone living in the UK free of charge, regardless of immigration status, a government spokeswoman said. Well, Alma, she also added that people registered with a GP or general practitioner are being contacted at the earliest opportunity, and they are working closely with partners and external organizations to get in touch with those who are not registered with a GP to make sure they are also offered the vaccine. Britain is banking on its biggest ever vaccination program as a way out of one of the world's worst outbreaks that has seen more than 112,000 deaths. Well, it has so far vaccinated more than 11 million people using either the Pfizer-BioNTech or Oxford AstraZeneca shots. You know, Alma, the government has set itself a target of inoculating 15 million of the most vulnerable people by the end of this week. But ministers and health officials are concerned the rollout could be undermined by any segment of the population not getting the jabs. It is not known that how many people without a valid legal status are in Britain, with some estimates that are putting the figures as high as 1.3 million. Meanwhile, here in the UK, the officials also fear that large numbers within Black, African, and South Asian communities could also be reluctant to take part in the vaccine drive, partly because of mistrust. The British Medical Association, BMA, which has previously called for immigration data sharing to be suspended during the pandemic, said the message that people's status will not be checked must be communicated clearly and widely. For the vaccination program to be successful, it is crucial that we get as many people vaccinated as possible. John Chisholm, its ethics committee chair, told the AFP in a statement. It is therefore vital that there are absolutely no barriers preventing migrant groups coming forward for vaccination. Chisholm added that it was particularly important given the massively disproportionate impact of the pandemic on BAME, Black, Asian, and minority ethnic populations. Back to you, Alma.
All right. Thank you very much for your update. Aribel, you stay safe, and thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for having me, Alma. Stay safe. Reporting from the United Kingdom, I am Aribel Celestino. We live in interesting times.
Meanwhile, students in Ontario, Canada resumes in-person learning. We have Joshua Santillana of our Toronto bureau with that report. Joshua.
Here in Ontario, Canada, in-person learning will resume starting Monday, February 8th for school boards outside the Greater Toronto Area. For the 3 COVID hotspot regions, Toronto, Mississauga, and York, students will go back to the classroom on Tuesday, February the 16th. Here's Ontario Minister of Education, Stephen Lecce, with the announcement.
We made a commitment to Ontario parents that we would get your child back to class, but it had to be safe. You know, we're the only province in the country to have cautiously reopened our schools as we have, but we followed medical advice. And now, with the unanimous voice of all local medical officers of health, with the full support of the chief medical officer of health and some of the best pediatric hospitals in the country, we are able to reopen our schools now that community transmissions are down, with strong protocols in place and stricter screening and better province-wide access to asymptomatic testing.
In-person learning has always been a contentious topic in Ontario since it closed down its schools during the first wave. Virtual learning, though an obvious alternative, has posed inequitable challenges for educators and students, according to Children's Mental Health Ontario. When it comes to online learning, there's no one-size-fits-all approach. Every child engages in learning in their own way, and teachers are developing a whole new set of skills in order to engage the students. The situation is really challenging for everyone. The Elementary Teachers Foundation of Ontario gave their response to Minister Lecce's announcement. Take a listen. The Ford government's plan to reopen schools in Ontario without adequate layers of protection in place risks future closures and a possible third wave of the COVID-19 pandemic. To safely reopen schools and to keep them open, which is everyone's goal, the province must prioritize safety over political grandstanding. ETFO President Sam Hammond further added, ETFO and others have said this on numerous occasions, but it is worth repeating since it takes the government so long to listen. While the measures they have finally put in place will help, they are not sufficient. Schools still need smaller classes, mandatory masking for kindergarten, and CO2 monitors and portable air purification units in every classroom. Sick Kids Canada recommends that a daily in-person classroom setting is the best model as it gives children more consistency and stability, but with a call for a very important factor to be considered. An important factor to consider in this respect is emerging evidence indicating inequalities in the social and economic burden of COVID-19, which may further disadvantage children or youth living in areas with higher infection burden, where educational inequality and barriers to online learning may be more pronounced, and equities that disproportionately impact Black, Indigenous, people of color, and other disadvantaged groups in Ontario. In Toronto, Joshua Santayana, Eagle News. We live in interesting times.
In other news, 1 year after his first impeachment, former President Trump finds himself the subject of an unprecedented second trial in the Senate, whose members must determine whether he incited a deadly assault on the U.S. Capitol. The 100 senators will also step into uncharted territory when they sit in judgment of a president who is no longer in office, a deeply damaged political figure who remains a potent force in his party even without the power of the White House. Take a look.
Donald John Trump, President of the United States, is impeached for high crimes and misdemeanors.
And after this, we're going to walk down, and I'll be there with you. We're going to walk down. We're going to walk down anyone you want, but I think right here, we're going to walk down to the Capitol because they want to steal the election. The radical left knows exactly what they're doing. They're ruthless, and it's time that somebody did something about it.
And following the despicable attack on January the 6th, there must be truth and accountability if we are going to move forward, heal, and bring our country together once again. Sweeping something as momentous as this under the rug brings no healing whatsoever. Let's be clear about that.
And I'm pleased that Leader Schumer and I were able to reach an agreement on a fair process and estimated timeline for the upcoming Senate trial. This structure has been approved by both former President Trump's legal team and the House managers because it preserves due process and the rights of both sides.
Trump didn't want us to breach it. He just wanted us to stand up and shout. He even said, no violence, you guys. Keep the violence down. The people that busted those doors down weren't the people that we followed today. We came out here for God and love.
I still believe that Trump is going to win this. I still, with all my heart. In fact, I know it.
Continues here on Eagle News. We'll be right back.
Is brought to you by Canriv Corporation, your ventilation and air conditioning specialist. Services offered: supply and installation of elevators, escalators, air conditioners, ventilators, jet towel, hand dryers, generators, access control system, factory automation, and modernization. For more info, please contact Ami Kanke at 0915-263-7198 or 0998-900-3224.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
This portion is brought to you by Kubert, an expert in air conditioning and electromechanical, also engaged in structural, electrical, fire protection, plumbing, and sanitary services. Kubert, your ultimate MAPS air conditioning solutions.
Welcome back to the news. The 2020-2021 La Nina phenomenon has passed its peak, the UN Weather Agency said Tuesday, but its impact on temperatures, rain and storm patterns is set to continue. La Nina refers to the large-scale cooling of the surface temperatures in the central and eastern equatorial Pacific Ocean, occurring every 2 to 7 years. The effect has widespread impacts on weather around the world, typically the opposite impacts to the El Niño warming phase in the southern oscillation cycle. Besides the cooling effect, La Nina is usually associated with wetter conditions in some parts of the world and drier conditions in others. La Nina conditions have been in place since August to September 2020, according to the atmospheric and oceanic indicators. The WMO said there was a 65% likelihood that La Nina will persist during February to April, and the odds shift rapidly thereafter, with a 70% chance that the tropical Pacific will return to neutral conditions in the cycle by April to June.
And Northern Europe is still gripped by snow and freezing temperatures, dubbed Storm Darcy, covering the Netherlands, Czech Republic, and part of Germany before reaching the United Kingdom and northern France. The Netherlands remain gripped by snow and the freezing temperatures. Several schools were shut. They were due to reopen after a 7-week closure and closing some coronavirus test and vaccination sites. The sub-zero conditions are set to grip the Netherlands into next week. In Germany, meanwhile, snowfall caused major disruption to trains and cancellations of services between cities, including Hamburg and Hanover. Thick snow of up to 30 centimeters, meanwhile, disrupted road traffic with hundreds of accidents and part of a motorway in North Rhine-Westphalia closed by police after it turned into an ice rink. Belgium, which also neighbors the Netherlands, received a light dusting of snow but was expecting a big temperature drop as the week progresses. In Britain, the Met Office issued an amber weather warning in southeast England for what local media dubbed the beast from the east, too. The first east in 2018 dumped 10 days of snow in Britain. The current warning is for roads becoming blocked by deep snow and disruptions to bus, rail, and air travel.
In other news, Indian rescue workers battled through tons of rock and mud Tuesday, searching for survivors in a choked Himalayan tunnel after a deadly flood, apparently triggered by a glacial burst, smashed through 2 mountain dam projects. More than 170 people were still missing 2 days after a wall of water and debris hurtled down a valley in the northern state of Uttarakhand, destroying bridges and roads, hitting 2 hydroelectric power plants and killing dozens. Most of those missing were workers at the 2 power plants, with some trapped in a 2.7-kilometer U-shaped tunnel in Tampovan that filled with mud and rocks when the 20-meter high flood hit. Police said 12 people were rescued from one side of the tunnel on Sunday, but another 34 were still trapped at the other end. The disaster has been blamed on rapidly melting glaciers in the Himalayan region caused by global warming, building activity for dams and dredging riverbeds for sand for use in the construction industry are other suggested factors.
And as we saw there, a glacier broke off the mountainside, triggering this deadly flash flood through a valley in Uttarakhand state early on Sunday. Now survivors are recounting their experience, with one of them saying, quote, "The difference between life and death was just 2 minutes." Take a look.
हम वहीं पे नीचे काम कर रहे थे और हमको घर से फ़ोन आया, तो फ़ोन जैसे ही आया तो हमने भागने की तैयारी शुरू की। उसमें कुछ बंदे भाग पाए, कुछ नहीं भाग पाए, कुछ बह गए उसमें। तो 2 मिनट का फर्क पड़ा, ज़्यादा नहीं, 2 मिनट। 2 मिनट लेट होते भागने में तो हम भी मर गए थे उसमें। हम क्या, हम लोग 25-30 बंदे और
कि जब ग्लेशियर टूटा तो पूरा वैली में ऊपर से लगभग यहाँ से 2-3 किलोमीटर ऊपर से यहाँ पे पूरा क्षेत्र में जैसे क्लाउड से जैसे लग गया था और पूरे धरती में कंपन आ गया था। और उसके बाद एकाएक पानी का फोर्स और पूरा जितना भी रॉ मटेरियल था वो उसके साथ बहने लग गया था। भगवान से प्रार्थना कर सकते हैं कि वो लोग कहीं पे अगर साइड पे किसी मशीन में किसी उसके अंदर हो तो वही तभी सेफ हो सकते हैं।
The U.S. ambassador to Vietnam has wrapped a Lunar New Year video to the country that has set the local internet alight, drawing a measure of admiration and cringing from those who watched it. Please watch this.
Time for introductions are at hand. Hi, my name is Dan. I'm from Nebraska. I'm not a big city boy. Then 3 years ago,
A career diplomat who served previously in Kuwait, China, and Japan is featured roaming the streets of Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City, wearing headphones and rhyming a message to the country. After the decades-long war between the U.S. and Vietnam, relations between the two powers were formally reset when then-President Barack Obama visited in 2016 and lifted a long-standing embargo. Trade tensions have recently ramped up, however, after Washington accused Hanoi of currency manipulation.
cash for the kids, blessings for the family, love for my parents and everyone around me. Now mine been on from mine to yours, from my shores to your shores, our friendship endures.
In other news, blink and you could easily miss it. Wedged between a doctor's surgery and a hairdressing salon, London's thinnest house is only identified by a streak of dark blue paint. But the 5-door house in Shepherd's Bush, which is just 5 feet 6 inches at its narrowest point, is currently on the market for £950,000. Take a look.
Yeah, there are houses in London that are 5 stories high, but not have such a unique space, such individuality. The history that comes from this house, from the owners that owned it in the past, they've all put their own stamp on it.
Now, there was a strange sight in Switzerland today. Take a look. This is the ski resort in Switzerland. A rust-colored coating on top of the snow can be seen, and the hazy atmosphere was caused by a rare weather system that blew in dust all the way from the Sahara Desert in North Africa. Although the phenomenon takes place almost every year, the occurrence was particularly striking this time around due to the strength of the winds and the volume of sand particles in the air, according to regional meteorological services.
And the first Arab interplanetary mission is expected to reach Mars orbit today on the most critical stage of its journey to unravel the secrets of weather on the red planet. The unmanned probe, named Al-Amal, Arabic for Hope, blasted off from Japan last year, the latest step in the UAE's ambitious space program. But the UAE's ambitions go much further, with the goal of building a human settlement on Mars by 2117. In the meantime, it plans to create a white-domed science city in the deserts outside Dubai to simulate Martian conditions and develop the technology needed to colonize the planet. The UAE has plans to launch an unmanned rover to the moon by 2024, and it's also eyeing future mining projects beyond Earth, as well as space tourism. It has signed a memorandum of understanding with Richard Branson's space tourism company, Virgin Galactic, and announced the creation of a space court to settle commercial disputes relating to space industries.
I would never consider moving to Mars.
Me too. But before we go, hey CJ, I have another message for you on your birthday, but I wasn't able to air yesterday, but here it is.
Hello, CJ Hero. Magandang araw, magandang tanghali, o magandang gabi sa iyo. Sige, God bless you, ha?
Hello, CJ. Happy birthday, Many more birthdays to come, CJ. Enjoy your day. Queen of the day. CJ is the name. And Darius is the name also. Enjoy. Happy birthday.
Hi, CJ. Happy birthday. May you have many more to come. Enjoy your special day. God bless.
Sira po.
He said, oh, but me and my wife are camera shy, but I'll do it.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Tito Paeng, and everyone from the Kesaya show. Well, that's it for tonight's broadcast. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you so much for the greetings. I am CJ Hero. We'll see you again tomorrow.
And at the end of the day, there remains so much more to be grateful for. I'm Alma Angeles, and we live in interesting times.